In Oracle Private Cloud Appliance, a virtual cloud network, or VCN, is a customizable private network that closely resembles a traditional on-premise network. It allows you to define your own IP address space, create subnets, and configure routing and security rules to control traffic flow. VCNs are fundamental to organizing and securing your cloud resources within PCA, enabling efficient communication between instances and integration with your on-prem network. In this video, I will demonstrate how to create a virtual cloud network on Oracle Private Cloud Appliance, which is the first step in provisioning cloud infrastructure. Let me show you the cloud resources we will provision in this video. We will create a VCN with /23 CIDR. In this VCN, we will create two subnets. One is public subnet and the other is a private subnet. We will also provision necessary routing and firewall rules to make this VCN usable. Then we will provision two VMs to test the network environment. In PCA, the Internet Gateway functions differently comparing to the public cloud environment. Within PCA, the Internet Gateway connects this VCN to your data center network rather than directly connect to the public Internet. A public subnet is a segment of network that allows resources within it to communicate directly with the data center network. This setup is essential for hosting web server and other services that need to be accessed from the outside of the VCN. Conversely, a private subnet is the network segment that doesn't have direct route to the data center network. Resources within the private subnet cannot be accessed directly from data center network and typically require network address translation gateway or net gateway or a backend host in the public subnet to initiate outbound data center connections. Despite this limitation, the private subnet is crucial for enhancing security by isolating the sensitive resources from directly exposed to the data center network. Okay, let's get started. We will start from the Compute Enclave UI. I have already provisioned a compartment called Playground for this demo, and all the resources will be provisioned in that compartment. Let me show you the compartment. Here's the playground. It just been created. Go back to the dashboard. We will start with provision the VCN. So we select the virtual cloud network. There's nothing in the playground right now. We have to click the create virtual cloud network. Okay, look at our design. What we have to do is create a VCN called VCN test, and this is the CIDR block. So we go back, VCN test, create this in the compartment playground, and here is the CIDR block. Maybe we can enable the DNS, and we can say here like test, create a VCN. The VCN will be provisioned. Let's go back to our design again. What else did we have to create? Okay, we have to have internet gateway, we have to have net gateway, and two routing. These four resources should be provisioned first before we provision the subnet. Let's start with the gateway. Let's go back. Okay, it's now available. So let's create two gateway. Here on the left below of the screen, you can see that there are a number of resources that you can provision. Let's start with internet gateway. You click the internet gateway and then just create here and then IGW. Okay, internet gateway. We just tell them the name. Okay. Provisioning. We don't need to wait for the object to be provisioned completely. We can create multiple objects in parallel. Let's create a net gateway. Go to the net gateway. create one, create. What else that we should create? Go back to the design. We should have two route table. Okay, front end and back end. For route table, you have to put the CIDR block that is not within the VCN. Okay. In this route table, it means anything that is not within this VCN, please route it through Internet Gateway. And this is the route table for the public subnet. And here's the route table for the private subnet. Let's create this part first, okay? We create the route table and security list for the public subnet, and then we create the public subnet. Go back to the browser. When VCN create, there's default route table. You can use this one also, but in this case, I will create a new one. Let's create a new route table, route front end. We have a new rule. The new rule say, I would like to route to Internet Gateway for the front end, and anything that is not within the VCN, I will route it to Internet Gateway. That's it for the front end route table. What else that you have to create? Go back to the design. You have to have a firewall rule for front end, and the firewall rule say we allow ingress from data center using port 22, and then we allow out to place to data center network. We allow all protocol, but to the backend CIDR block, which is 10.0.1.0/24, we will allow only 2022. Okay. Scroll down. Okay, this security list. Create one. SL front end. For ingress rule, we allow only TCP protocol from any source port to port 22 within this VCN. That's it. This ingress. For egress, to go to data center network, we allow all protocol. But if we would like to go to the backend, which is 10.0.1.0/24, we allow only port 22. So we go back to the browser. We add another ingress rule. 10.0.1.0/24. We allow only TCP and allow to connect to only port 22. Okay. Now the routing and the firewall rule is ready. Then it's ready for us to provision a public subnet. So we come back here, go to the subnet, and then click create subnet. And subnet is called subnet front end, and the CIDR range is 10.0.0.0/24. Let's go back to the design again. Yes, that's correct. The route table, use the route table front end, and this is the public subnet. When you create public subnet, you have to make sure that you have to select this, okay? And you can define the DNS label. For example, I use it public here. You just put something. DSCP option, you can choose the default one, okay? And here's a rules that you can add the firewall rules, and I think we have already provisioned one firewall rules for this. It's called SL front end. Just click create, and then the subnet gonna be provisioned. Next, let's create the routing table and the firewall rule for the private subnet. Okay, this is one easy. Anything that is not within the private subnet, you route to NAT, and then we allow from front end only port 22, and the egress, we just allow all protocol to the data center network. So we go back here, we create the route table first, create another route table, RT back end. And the route rule is we use NAT gateway. Anything that is not within this VCN, we route through that gateway. Okay. What else that we have to create? I think we have to create a security list. So we create security list SL back end, and security list for ingress is anything that's from front end. We allow TCP to port 22 only. This is ingress. The egress say we allow anything to go out for all protocol. Let's go back and check. Okay, NAT gateway correct. Front end, we allow only port 22. For egress, we allow all. Front end, okay. I believe we are ready to create a second subnet. Let's create a new subnet called backend, right? SN backend in the same compartment, and I want it to be on this CIDR block 10.0.1.0/24. The route table, I use the backend route table, and this is the private subnet. This is important. You have to select private here. DNS label, I would like it to be private. I can use the same DHCP option, and security list, we choose the backend security list and then create. Now our VCN is ready. Here's the VCN that we have provisioned. We use this CIDR block. Okay, it's in compartment playground, and we have two subnets. First subnet is front-end subnet. It have its own CIDR range. This is the DNS label, and here's the route table, which is the route front end. And here's the security list of this front end subnet. And here is the private, the backend subnet using different CIDR range, have the DNS label private, use different route table, and have different security lists. Let's test it, okay, by provisioning VM. Before we provision VM, I would like to have some explanation regarding the compute instances. Compute instances is virtualized compute environment. And within PCA, we have already provided a number of platform images that you can use. We have Oracle Linux version 7.9, version 8 and 9. We have Solaris 11.4 images. Custom images are supported, so you can import more images from maybe VMware or other platform, or you can reuse the existing platform image and do some customization and come up with your own custom image. Okay. Compute instance provision, and it have to connect to subnet within your VCN. Okay, and we support fully lifecycle operation. Now you can start, stop, create, delete. Okay. One thing to note for Oracle platform image that chip within PCA, it's provided by us, and when you provision it, you need to provide a public key. There's no default password in this platform image, so public key is required. ChroniD is already set up in the VM, so the time synchronization will be automatically for you. Proxy is not set, so you have to set the proxy for the platform image to make things work. And importantly, there are some IP addresses that is protected within PCA, and that IP is important if you would like to reset the firewall rules with the command here, and then that VM gonna be usable. So we are ready to provision 2 VMs to test the network environment that we have created. We will create VM1 and VM2. VM1 will sit in the front end, Our VM2 will sit in the backend, and we will try SSH into VM1 from our network. And from VM1, the only thing that you can do, right, per the firewall rules here, is that you can SSH into VM2. We go back to PCA dashboard, and we click the instance menu here. The instance menu will list all the instances within that compartment. Now the compartment is selected to playground and nothing there. So let's provision at first VM. We just click here, click instance. The VM name, you can name anything. For example, test VM1. Okay, this is the name. Create in compartment playground. And here's the option. When you provision an instance, you have the option that you can put it into which fault domain. Or if you don't care much, you can just let PCA automatically select for you. Later we can move it. Okay, it's not permanent thing, so we just allow them to select whatever fault domain for us. For the source image, you have choice to have platform image and custom image. We didn't have any custom image yet, so we will provision this VM1 from the platform image. We will provision Oracle Linux version v9. Okay, and we have only the recent built on 29th of May. Next, you have to provide them the shape of the VM. In this case, we have flex shape. Maybe we provision 1 OCPU and 10 gig memory. You can adjust it. For example, it can be maybe 2 OCPU, 20 gig memory. You can specify the volume size. Okay, the default volume size is 50 gig. Okay, so we just provision it normally. And then you have to tell them which subnet, which VCN you would like them to provision to. We have already provisioned VM test, and we have front end for this VM1. And here is important, because this VM is provisioned in the public subnet, you have to assign the public IP. Otherwise, you cannot access to it. Okay. You have an option also to select the private IP. For example, in this case, if you put nothing, PCA will pick any IP in that private CIDR range for you. Or maybe you can specify something like, in this case, I would like it to get it from 10.0.0.100. I have one SSH key that I use. You have to provide the public key, not the private key. You have to select your public key. You also have choice to provide the cloud init script, okay? Or you just skip it if you don't have anything special to set up. Let's create instance. Okay, the configuration is flex shape, is 2 CPU, 20 gig memory, 24.6 gigabit per second network bandwidth. Networking, it can get the private IP for us. Okay, we have already provided private IP that I want, right? They pick it for us. And here's the public IP that I can access to this VM. Now the VM is ready. Let's pick the public IP address of this VM which we can connect to it. Open the terminal and let's try SSH into that VM. The default user for the VM is OPC, so we SSH to that VM. And now we are in that VM. After you get into the VM, you can see that this VM can have only one IP, which is the private CIDR range that we provide to them, and it's .100 as we specify when we provision the VM. The IP address and the FQDN name will be with this VM all the way for the full life cycle of the VM until you terminate it. And you can see that even the DNS is working here, right? We provision VM1, and this is the DNS label for the front end subnet. It's public, and this is the label for the VCN is test. So this is a full FQDN name for this VM1. Let's see how many CPU it have. I have already mentioned that This VM is provisioned with 2 OCPU. The 2 OCPU is 4 vCPU, right? And in Linux, it shows the vCPU, or the number of threads, that is 4 threads. This is correct. And if we look into the memory, it's 20 gig, right? So the configuration of the VM is correct. If you look into the disk of this VM have 50 gig, which is the default one. Okay. Next, let's provision another VM in. Okay. If you go back to the instance list, you can see that now our VM is ready. Okay. And this VM is the VM that sits in the public subnet. So there are 2 IP addresses. One is public IP, which we can access to that VM from our data center network. And this is the private VM, which is inside the range of the subnet that we have defined. Let's create another VM which sits in the private subnet. Please remember, when you will provision a VM in PCA using platform image, you have to specify the SSH key. Otherwise, that VM cannot be accessible. And the VM2 that we're gonna create is actually sitting in the private subnet. Okay, so we have to specify the public key for it so that they can SSH from VM1 to VM2. So the first step is I need to create a SSH key that will be used to provision the VM2. So I create a key in VM1, and this is the public key that created that we will use when we provision the VM2. Let's go back to the dashboard. Okay, in this instance list, right, we have only one VM. Let's create another VM. Hash VM2. I let them automatically select the fault domain for us. We create from the platform image. Let's create different versions of the VM, maybe Oracle Linux version 8. Let's make the shape like maybe 1 OCPU and 10 gig memory. The subnet is VCN test, and we choose the backend subnet. No need to tick this. You can see from here, we cannot tick the assign public IP because we have already selected the private subnet. So in the private subnet, we have no choice. There's no public IP, or even you have it, you cannot access to it using that public IP because there's no direct route, right? The private IP, I just leave it there. So I let them choose for us. I don't want to specify anything. And the VM name, let's say VM2. And here is the SSH key that we will use. I choose the pass public key, and I pass the public key that I have already created from the VM1. Scroll down, nothing much, and then we create the create instance. So test VM2 is provisioning. The configuration is 1 OCPU, 10 gig memory. Everything is loaded. Okay. Let's wait for a moment. Okay. Test VM2 is up and running, and you can see here that they have only the private IP. And in this case, right, we ask the PCA to automatically select an available private IP for this VM. So it select 10.0.1.2 for us. It's different than the test VM1 that we specify the private IP that we want. Thing is up. So let's test it. We open the terminal again. Here is the VM1. SSH VM2.private. Now we are in the VM2. You can see that I can access to that VM2 using FQDN. Okay, and the IP address is here, and let's see. Okay, the IP address is correct. The memory is 10 gig, and CPU is 2 vCPU, which is 1 OCPU. Remember, when we create the backend subnet, we already have a route table that say that anything that not within this VCN side range, we have to write through the NAT gateway to the data center network. Let's test if this setup works within this VM2. Go back to the VM2. I have already set up the proxy in yum.conf, so I can install more package into this machine. Let's say sudo dnf install python. Let's install Python and see if NAT gateway work as expected. If I can install additional package on this VM2, it means that the NAT gateway that we have already set up and all the routing work as expected. And you can see that it have ability to connect to the data center network, and with the proxy it can go out to the internet and install the package as needed. Yep. Let's go check our VM1. Our VM1 is provisioned in the public subnet. It has 2 IP addresses. One is a public IP that we can access into it from the data center network. And VM1 also have ability that can initiate the network connection from inside the subnet out to the data center network. Let's set up some proxy on the VM1 and see if it can access to the data center network. Let me do this. Edit yum.conf. I put the proxy here and try to install something. Maybe git, maybe perl, and see if, okay, you can see that it have ability that can connect to the data center network. They try to get some information from the data center network, which is actually connect to the internet. After we install perl and git, let's check again in the VM if both software have been installed successfully. Yes, this is git and here's perl. With this test, we can conclude that all the VCN perform as expected. VM in VM1 can be accessed from customer data center, and at the same time it has ability that can initiate network connection from within the subnet, which is the front-end subnet, out to the customer data center and via the proxy out to the internet. I think that's it for this demo. Thank you and see you.